Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network. Welcome back to the show, Grant, the Honorable Grant, Dr. Grant, Venerable, joining us today.
Why, thank you.
How are you, sweetheart?
I'm fine.
Great to
How are
see
you?
I'm good. So, how are you? How's California life treating you?
It's beautiful out here. It's going to be up in the low 80s today, which is real ideal.
Good. Good for you. We're still suffering with some cold, but everything's good. So fill me in. What do we have for today? What's happening in your world?
Well, what's happening is I'll be moving in a week to the family's new home that we're renovating. It's just 2.5 or 3 miles away from where I've been for about 9 or 10 months. What occurs to me, thinking this morning over how I got to where I am today, that I think would be a useful thing for our listeners to hear about. And I'm going to label this a walk in the park, a meandering vacation through the everyday life realities. It's really in a mode of getting things done one at a time, instead of trying to do everything at once or nothing. So I'm going to start with the title of my memoir and meander through what it means. And the title is Footprints in the Chaotic Unknown. And I think nothing has been more chaotic than what everyone is experiencing today. I almost said experimenting, because experience and experiment mean the same thing to the brain. So this is, the title is, as I said, Footprints in the Chaotic Unknown. However, the subtitle is Art, Science, Oracles, and Kinfolk. And I want to put some emphasis on art today in moving into science and everyday life. Whether one is an artist or a scientist, what comes up today is on a whole topic I haven't really dwelt on that much. But it's important for a civilization of people, intelligent primates, who are always in learning mode. And that means we're experiencing new things constantly. And I want to turn that again into the word experiment. And that brings out my scientific background. But in reality, everyone needs to be a scientist in order to make sense and success of life and to minimize challenges. Well, we can't minimize the challenges as much, but and there are disappointments, but how to handle all of this. And so I'm going to read some passages from the first volume of that memoir. That chapter 10 is called Sentient Awakenings in Art and Chemistry. So as I use the word awakening, I think of the widespread, rather funny use of the word woke, which is used, I think, by people who think they're putting down something that they don't like, but it just really makes them look very strange. Because when we're alive, it's best to be awake and woke so that we know what we're doing. So it starts like this. I had taken a special summer class that the Los Angeles Otis Art Institute used to have every summer. They still may be doing it. I was awarded an art scholarship as a 14-year-old, almost 15, to go to that art school, which is quite renowned now, to study some art. And it was taught by a master teacher. The summer instructor was the renowned master studio painter, Joseph Maniani. Maniani did some uh, artwork, was the art consultant for Fahrenheit 451, that movie. Uh, so he was a perfect teacher to have. Um, but skipping along, it was at UCLA when I was a freshman uh, as a chemistry major. And I still, with all the oil technique I learned at the Otis Institute for Manieni, I hadn't really settled into what I wanted to paint because my interest was so eclectic and in so many things. I was interested in outer space, astronomy. I like to paint paintings against a background of the cosmos. And it finally started coming together. And so I write here, it was at UCLA in Professor Mustafa El Sayed's Chemistry 1A course that I found a new portal to my inner self, namely my calling to a career in chemistry teaching and research. And then in Professor Kenneth Trueblood's Chem 1B course the following semester, another portal opened. This was the opening of my third eye, which you would feel right here in your forehead. That's where the chakras would envision the third eye living. And the third eye is the indigo chakra of inner vision that led to my first rather crude artistic depictions of chemical structure and reaction. Perhaps not surprisingly, I found myself smitten with a new compulsion, a yearning to envision the electron's view of the world. Now, that's something to think about. And I realized that's what I was really attempting to do. How does the electron, which is contained in atoms and molecules, how would it see an atom, another electron, a whole molecule? And if chemistry really is what the electrons are doing in atomic matter, as Professor Willard Libby, the Nobel Prize winner at UCLA, used to say, this yearning only increased over the years to understand what the electrons are doing in atomic matter. As a consequence, without realizing it, I was on a collision course with a lifetime fascination with epistemology. That is the really wonderful $64,000 word. Epistemology comes from the Latin word epistula, meaning letter, as in writing a letter, as in Paul's New Testament epistles or letters. He wrote them to the people around the Mediterranean. Epistle writing was a standard means of communicating information and wisdom to recipients in the ancient world. In his early ecclesiastical role, Paul wrote epistles to disseminate his theology, namely his study of God. As the Peter Drucker of his day, he also preached his organizational systems know-how to the churches at Corinth, Ephesus, Galatia, Philippi, and other towns of the Mediterranean world. As a study of how one knows what one knows, epistemology would become a staple of my vocabulary in the coming years. It is that remarkable branch of philosophy that investigates systems of knowledge. The long reach of epistemology seemed to sharpen my curiosity about the electron's view of the molecular world. It drew me into a new way of thinking and knowing, one that enabled me to learn some pretty complex subject matter in physics and chemistry. It was about something my non-science peers indelicately used to call some pretty deep itché, and that's French for stuff, also known as itché in polite company. So I just did a play on words to not say the four-letter word that people mean by itche. This deep stuff, of course, referred to pastimes engaged in by really bright science student acquaintances when they amused themselves outside class. These were pastimes like deriving basic equations in Isaac Newton's classical mechanics, as in predicting the orbital motions of planets and comets around the sun, or in quantum mechanics, as in calculating the energy states of electrons near atomic nuclei. It was just these kinds of pastimes that seemed to come so naturally to my effortlessly bright and somewhat intimidating college classmates from such academically reputable local area high schools as Dorsey, Fairfax, Hamilton, Los Angeles, Palisades, and University High Schools. But at the end of the day, I was among the survivors of graduate school. I think that is because I stubbornly kept my eyes on the prize, like the proverbial tortoise that discovered a few tricks and learned to fly. As it turned out, many of the eager souls I had identified early on as effortlessly bright settled for more modest, scaled-back career goals over the years. These were goals that were, in any case, more normal for upper middle class and upper class young achievers. And so instead, they became respectably prosperous physicians, dentists, accountants, and lawyers instead of elementary particle physicists and neuroscientists, or, in my case, a physical chemist with serious leanings toward chemical physics. I start this next sentence off with the heading, Baptism by Fire and Keeping My Balance. As already hinted, the thrilling ordeal that was Chem 1B would be my baptism by fire in the discipline of thinking and doing chemistry. It would also prove to be my pathway to mastering greater self-discipline in life. One of the most important lessons that results from a true liberal arts education. But that is not always a given in most four-year college curricula, especially those that focused on getting a job on completion. I've stressed that in the past, Jill, as you realize, because even academically talented youngsters are subject to be thrown off track unless they master self-discipline, a critical facet of existence. My self-discipline that semester very much involved keeping my scholastic balance in the face of unplanned happenings, such as when I arrived late to important chemistry midterm exam on which I got a low grade. That was the week that the family lost an enduring pillar, the beloved wife of my great uncle, Blaine Venerable. Aunt Nellie died of pneumonia and old age at LA County's General Hospital. Her funeral, of course, was an obligatory family event. I was only too grateful that Dr. Trueblood's grading policy allowed for throwing out a student's lowest midterm exam score, surviving and handling the full range of academic and personal challenges I was facing had to count for preparing me for something significant. It simply had to count because the emotional roller coaster I was riding provided the kind of come to Jesus experiences that ought to count big time towards successfully preparing anyone for this and several future lifetimes. The upshot that spring 1962 semester was my grand entry to maintaining a life balance and a lifetime capacity for learning. It was my portal to the future at 20 years of age. Next is under the heading of Discovering Epistemology, a meta-language of the mind. Now, bear with me, everyone. Clearly, it was beginning to happen. My reconceptualizing chemical knowledge in parallel with the way it was traditionally presented in the textbooks, in a way that was more visually graphic and universal in design. This development anticipated an exciting holistic framework for devouring and organizing knowledge in any subject field, but in this instance, chemistry and physics in particular. I began to apply this same reconceptualization in other fields like mathematics, language, art, and music. Admittedly, this was not always easy, obvious, or pain-free, but through dogged persistence, the visual universal approach flowed more naturally with years of practice. I was experiencing time crossings between the visual arts and mathematical sciences, learning how to do artistic representation of chemical structure and principle. It was really about teaching myself epistemology, grappling with my own meta cognition. Meta meaning META, meta cognition. Meta means between. So it's that cognition between normal and way out there, abstract, spiritual, in fact. And that is mastering the meta language of my own mind. It meant first learning the knowledge concepts in my mind's own language of visual pictures and art symbols. If you could imagine, yes, there's thinking that everyone calls thinking, but everyone's mind has its own language through which it learns the deep knowledge in life. It means first, after learning those concepts in my mind's own language, visual pictures and art symbols, and then translating the pictures and symbols back into the traditional linear textbook formalisms so that I could pass my exams. Initially, I had to settle for more C grades than I ever needed because the process of learning and retranslating simply took longer than rote memory learning for tests. But once I mastered the approach, the concepts were virtually hardwired into my brain. So that's where swimming and kinesthetic learning come in. Furthermore, I discovered the connection between academic, cognitive-based learning with kinesthetic, muscle learning. This was revealed in swim class with my swim teacher, Bryant Jack Craddy, a doctoral research project. This is his research project on muscle learning. If our listeners haven't really heard of that, it's really where learning occurs first, in the muscles of the body. And there's many muscles involved with that. The knowledge concept could be made not only visual, but also physically felt as a profoundly tactile or kinesthetic sensation. I was learning how to re-deepen my brain grooves in the shapes of the concepts I was studying. And so that brings me to chalkboards, also known then as blackboards. And this became a critical tactile tool for my cognitive knowledge development. Little wonder that my high school geometry and advanced algebra teacher, Louise Nash, found her pupils' learning curves markedly accelerated when she sent us to the blackboard to work problems under her watchful eagle eye. I did the same with my chemistry students a decade later. There was a clear, if uncanny, psychic connection here with my father's profession as one of the nation's leading manufacturers of wool felt blackboard erasers, also called chalkboard erasers. Through the family firm, that's what he established, the Healy Manufacturing Company. Intensive study on chalkboard gave me a far more rapid corrective feedback capability than mere textbook reading and study. That is, more rapid than reading about theory and facts or even writing study notes with pen on paper about theory and facts. Seems obvious once one talks about that, but work at the chalkboard thoroughly engaged the total neural muscular system and its nerve impulses in my body. There were the impulses darting between the eye to brain networks and the muscle groups connecting the arm, the wrist, the hand, and fingers. Reading by itself engaged eye to brain channels only. Writing study notes engaged a few more channels, that is, eye to brain, plus the small muscle domain of fingers and hand. I am mostly right-handed, except in playing keyboards and a few other tasks like manipulating eating utensils. My memory of scientific knowledge was developed grasping chalk at the blackboard in the total visual neuromuscular system, sending informational signals down my entire right arm from shoulders to fingers. This memory pathway was enormously more extensive, detailed, and long-lasting than merely reading or writing notes. Learning facts and concepts via muscle movement deeply grooved my brain in ways I could not have anticipated until I actually experienced the results. From a conventional point of view, classroom performance based on grades and test scores, I was usually well above average in my mental ability. But then I began grasping technical concepts that should have been, by conventional beliefs, of student ability way beyond my reach, but turned out to be well within my reach. But here we come to the connection with how music as art experience comes into play. Sight reading at the piano and mastering new and unfamiliar musical scores provided me with a powerful enhancement to academic cognitive learning of any subject, including science and mathematics. This was a use of parallel worlds of activities, which in conventional thinking seemed quite absurd because music and mathematical science seemed so obviously unrelated to traditional minds. Playing music reinforced for me the cognitive link between pressing down on the piano keys and hearing the resultant sounds. Playing music reinforced the vital link between the printed symbols on the musical score and the miracle of the resulting sound. Furthermore, the practice of a musical instrument, in my case, the piano, primed my brain grooves for academic learning. In other words, my playing of music reinforced a cognitive link or correspondence between words whether printed in a science textbook or spoken by a science teacher, and the resulting miracle of my mastering complex topics in math and science. The force applied by small muscle groups and fingers, hands, and arms in playing an instrument, as well as the muscles of the throat when vocalizing, improves the function of the motor control areas of the cerebral cortex. But these are the same areas of the brain implicated in the evolution of our species and its reasoning capacity. Moment of silence, please. Such a profound statement. Creating pictures of particularly challenging math and science concepts in the form of drawings on paper or sketches at the chalkboard or oil on canvas paintings. In most cases, brought welcome breakthroughs in my understanding of those concepts. Furthermore, repetitive striking of my fingers on the piano keys produced more deeply retentive memory of the musical score. The more resistance or stiffness in the keys was built into the piano keys. It was almost impossible for me to memorize piano pieces on keyboards with little or no resistance in the keys against the percussive striking action by the fingers. That is why old-fashioned, now passé blackboards and chalkboards were far more effective in deep and rapid cognitive learning of academic classroom subject matter. And my algebra teachers, Mrs. Nash, realized that they were more effective than today's whiteboards with soft felt markers and computer touch screens and keyboards, keypads that, while perhaps really cool, offer practically no physical resistance to the push of the fingers. Brain learning requires forceful resistance from the medium one is using to learn, whether a chalkboard or piano keys. It is to make a lasting impression on the physical brain, if it is to make an impression. It is a general principle of life where there is no struggle in overcoming a resisting force. There is no gain, no learning. The quiet workings of distant ancestral origins come out in this paragraph. This powerful, if strange and unusual approach would create the seed of a more elaborate system that would carry me into the future, including the earning of a Doctor of Philosophy, PhD degree in chemistry. This was a system called ontology, another word that's in parallel to epistemology. Ontology is discerning what is real, discerning being from not being, which in my view is the complement of epistemology, how we know. It took another 20 years to recognize that I stumbled onto primal epistemological ideas of ancestral teachers in the 19th century American South that their ancestors applied during 2 centuries of servitude. But in my family, it was a learning system intimately traceable to time-distant forebears who resided in the African Gold Coast and beyond. Indeed, my father's son Y chromosomal line traces back not to a European, but to an Akan-speaking, perhaps Fante ancestor who resided north of the Gold Coast prior to the late 1600s. The Fante descendants of today, who avoided capture and a one-way ticket to New World plantations, migrated later to their present-day homeland. This homeland is located in the western coastal region of Ghana. It stretches from Accra west through Cape Coast and Takoradi, a region I have enjoyed visiting many times. I would teach this system in the 1990s as a universal ontology just another highfalutin word like epistemology. So that's about the sketch of how I brought together art, science, mathematics over the years until I began to teach it at the university level.
Wow.
Now, do you
Grant,
want to?
lines are open. Here we go. 631-307-4010. 631-307-4010. All right, go ahead. Just want to make sure.
Yes. Um, so this has to do with the subtitles of my book on art and science, but it also connects into the next two titles, which is oracles and kinfolk. The oracle has to do with a very ancient concept in the world. Those particularly gifted people who, in a way, seem to be able to read the future based upon very great intuition and empathy with the universe and the world of spirit and science and math all put together. I think one reason I wanted to come here in this topic of epistemology, because the whole conversation about education is missing the point of language. And epistemology is the first language of learning. Epistles, letters written to spread knowledge to other people in a geography. But education is to spread knowledge to young people in a more immediate time.
Yeah.
So it's transmitted over many generations. And all one has to do with one's computer is be connected to the internet and connected into a news feed. And you will see all of what passes as maybe intelligent conversations about education, but I don't see much going on. And as I've said before, there's much criticism of education, but criticism always occurs in a society of human beings and people where one side disagrees with another side, particularly if people are seeking for power or running for positions of higher office. So the dialogue gets kind of broken, and not much sense comes out of it. Now we're hearing of the U.S. Department of Education is being assigned new roles.
Yeah.
Well, after it gets dismantled, but then what do you have left? The argument seems to be that states and localities know what's best for education in their own local areas. Well, if that's true, how do we get education to be good and optimal in the entire country most efficiently and most directly? Well, now that I'm back in California, one solution to that is to allow the state of California govern the standards for learning and teaching all over the country and just plug into that. That would certainly save a lot of time and hassle, because the public education and the private educational institutions in California are on the whole superior to any in the rest of the country. There are exceptions, but California is also the largest populous state. It has the largest educational systems. So I'm not trying to be funny or trivial or trite. I'm just really responding to some of the very weak arguments out there that, well, if you have a federal Department of Education, you're denying the states their right to determine that. Well, you really are not. We've had a federal department ever since President Jimmy Carter conceived the idea of how you achieve national standards for all of the states, peoples to adhere to and make it better for everyone.
Yeah.
Well, I'm certainly preferential to that, but it's how you do it. That's where the debates come in. And I've had enough experience now, and I think the latest ones I just talked about is how I experimented with my own mind's ability to learn better and better, more deeply and faster. So I get up this morning and I look at a news feed on my phone showing, oh, now the government is thinking of starting a new STEM education institute in Dayton, Ohio area. And I'm saying, well, all well is good, but
Yeah.
how are you going to do that we've got plenty of knowledge out there. Just come out to California and set up the standards of the University of California, the California State University system, the community college system, and then the great privates like Caltech, Stanford, and Pomona colleges. All the rest that are out here. Oh, I'm being, of course, jovial right now, but I'm being somewhat serious to try to prod people into some efficient discussion and conversation. But it seems money is being thrown at new stuff, and nothing specific has been mentioned in the news feeds about, oh, what theories of learning will it be using. It
Yeah.
never says anything about that. And what it leads to, and I think most of the public already realizes it leads to people who are founding their own businesses to get in on the public's tax dollars and run off with them and increase their own fortunes. When, if anything, we need to invest in what we already have and do well with it. So, any questions come up from you, Jill, or any thoughts you might have?
Well, just
Uh,
education-wise, and again, the lines are open. If people are having would like to talk, please call us 631-307-4010. I mean, you bring up education, and just for our listeners out there, who there's a variety of backgrounds, who we can be listening to this, from adults, teenagers to
right.
professionals, not even just professionals. Oh, I just got an echo there. That's weird. Um, you know, not everyone, and I'm going to be honest, my parents never forced me, or never even, I shouldn't say forced, discussed further education, right? Not every family in the United States, right? Let me just use, our region, stresses the importance of education, and it's a shame. And it's great that we go to school, and most of us get to go to, an elementary school, a high school, junior high school, and it's great to find a mentor. Not every kid finds a mentor, right, to kind of guide them. And if you don't come from a
Yes,
family
indeed.
that has an educational background, I feel like a lot of us could get lost. And my siblings never went to college. I was the last of three, and I only realized the value of it because I had a friend's mother tell me, well, you should be looking for colleges. And I'm like, well, why? My sister, my brother never did. My parents never talked about it because they never went to college. So I just feel my heart breaks for those out there who don't have families who, for whatever reason, are just not into further education. And I just really feel, I hope our school systems are really working hard on, I'm not going to say forcing, but enlightening our students to get the proper
Yeah.
education because, also, I'm sure and I know people that are super successful that never even went to college and pursued it. Everybody's life is different, but I feel no
That's
matter
right.
what career, like my son swears he's going to be a football player and he doesn't need to go to college. I said, no, 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 no. Yeah, have that goal, but you have to have the education and but Mom, I don't understand. I want to be a football player. Why would I waste my time going to school for all those years? And I'm like, it's not a waste of time because chances are you're going to need that degree. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't hire without degrees now. So whether you believe in education or not, it's kind of, you have to still get it unless you're in your own entrepreneurial
That's
business
right.
and you're right. And what is, I don't know your family. I know your dad was a doctor, right? And your family, do they all seek a higher education as well?
Yeah, well, it's been in the family
Yeah.
for three generations or more, way back in the deep South in the middle of the 1800s. And they knew people. They had friends who were founders of schools, founders of universities in the Deep South. So it's been a tradition in my family. And then I've
Yeah.
also spoken about the religious background of education. I don't mean the current debate about that you have to have the Ten Commandments in the
Mm-hmm.
classroom. Well, fine for those who want that. I'm saying that it all came out of the
Yeah.
Judeo-Christian history and tradition. It came out of the Jerusalem temple, and that set the standard for teaching and learning, no matter what the subject field, even though the first subject field was the theory of God. How does God act upon the universe, upon people? But it went into the development of science and technology later, like into the 16th, 17th, 18th,
Mm-hmm.
19th, and then the 20th centuries. So that's what I love to talk about and talk to student audiences about, and young audiences in general. Certainly young at heart audiences. I'm thinking of professional football, and I had a lot of youngsters I went to high school with who became successful pro players. My father wanted us, his children, to at least develop their bodies and have a sport that they could know well and keep up with. So he had us sent to the swimming pool early on, before we were 10 years of age, and learned swimming. So my brother and I became competitive swimmers in junior high and high school age periods. But then that was to really, well, I also
Yeah.
worked through the YMCA on YMCA swim teams, and the coach was developing in this ideal of the scholar, the professional, the the spiritually well developed, as well as being athletically well developed. So you have that balanced experience of life. And as you get older, you do experiments on your own to see what works. You heard about maybe a dietary substance supplement, and you try it. Does it work for you, however? And and that's what I've been doing really since junior high school. I was one of those youngsters that, and I had a few, about 35 cents to buy lunch in the in junior high. And when we would walk past the windows to the dining room where the faculty was eating, the students could see what they were eating just walking by the windows. And so they would see what I was eating. I was eating things like a fresh green salad with a nice dressing, or a jello mold salad, and maybe a hot roll or something, maybe a piece of chocolate cake and a carton of milk for dessert. So I got teased because, oh, you eat like the old ladies eat, the teachers in the cafeteria. And I said, well, so be it. I enjoy it. I have to say, by the time people get to be 40, they begin to look like what they eat. And because,
So
or
true, right? So true.
they look like how they exercise or do not exercise. And President Abe Lincoln had a saying for that. Every person, yeah, they look like how their mind works, how their digestive tracts work, what they put into their bodies, and all of that. So that's very important.
Mm.
Let's see. I had a couple of more things here to say. Oh, about language, and I think the last time I said you have to watch your language, people. Young people, watch your language. And by that I really mean linguistics. How does one learn linguistics and speak well and write well and master the meanings of words? And everything we experience is because of our inner language that we speak with ourselves first, and then the language we speak to others, to friends, to relatives, and to people we don't know. So when we see the news feeds again, we hear the news people and they speak of things that happen and is that what we want to happen, and how do we use our words to clarify things, or do we use words to confuse things? Um, yeah, I guess we had some events just in the last couple of days in the nation had to do with war and attacks on other countries. Um, and that kind of thing makes me very sad to see. However, um, I do want to emphasize the importance of language and linguistics, and particularly the language of our minds, how we train our minds to think, to believe, to believe righteously instead of wrongfully. So I guess that's where I'm coming from today.
Oh, well, thank you. We still got a few more minutes. Unfortunately, no one called. Do you not love us? We love Grant. Call 631-307-4010. Going to take this personal. No one likes us. All right. What else do you want to send? Yeah.
As long as people are enjoying it, I like that. And but anyway, in the meantime, they can read the book. It's in a ebook form on Amazon and Barnes and Nobles and Apple, and those will hold the reading public until I get to the next books, where I'll do more of current events interest and how they shape our thinking. Yeah, as people get older, grow older, I call it multi-annuation. In other words, going into multiple years. It's a nice way of saying growing older or aging.
Yeah.
Besides, it doesn't have the baggage, the psychological baggage that aging carries with it, and the news media keeps stroking those baggage words. And one of the main disadvantages of the baggage is that people are trained to believe that their health automatically diminishes the more years they have behind them or under their belts. And that is not necessarily true, unless there's something organically wrong, which can be corrected or partially corrected. The mind is supposed to lose its memories as one gets older. Sometimes I think I remember too much. I do sometimes I'm slower remembering someone's name more recently than a longer time ago. However, I don't have any problems in that regard. In terms of aging, should be a happy, joyful process of learning even more. And I guess it helps to have grandparents who had long memories and to maybe inherit that.
Well, thank you so much for your time today, and how, I appreciate you. Hope people reach out for the memoirs, reach out to you, and we'll talk again next week. Thank you so much.
Okay. You're welcome, Jill.
All right. Thank you, sweetie. You have a great day, okay? And to
Okay,
all of our
you
listeners,
too.
viewers, stay tuned.
You too.
You better call next week. Right? They better call next week. Thank you so much, sweetheart. Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
When I was little, I didn't talk for a long time. I liked things to always be the same. Anything new or different would scare and upset me. I was very sensitive to lights and sounds. It was almost like I had bigger eyes and ears than everyone else. So I built secret hiding places where nothing could get in. I didn't like looking people in the eye. It made me feel uncomfortable. I'd throw big tantrums over little things, like when my socks didn't match. Sometimes I'd do the same things over and over. until one day I found out I had autism. My family got me help. Slowly, I learned how to live with it better.
You can see signs of autism in children as young as 18 months. Early intervention can make a lifetime of difference. Learn the signs at autismspeaks.org/signs. Brought to you by Autism Speaks and the Ad Council.